So let's start by what is an insect, because a lot of people freely interchange bugs and insects. And an insect is really defined by its body type. It's an invertebrate, which means it has no spine, it has no backbone. It has 6 legs, it has 3 body parts. It just sounds like I'm making numbers up. But it has a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. The head is relatively self-explanatory, as is the abdomen. The thorax is what throws a lot of people off. The thorax is just the chest cavity. On a mammal or a human, this is my thorax. Below the neck, above the belly. Okay, that's pretty much what a thorax is. And then the abdomen, which is the belly and everything down here. So, you know, that's essentially what an insect is. And a lot of them, especially the predators, tend to have a exoskeleton. They don't have a backbone, so they have nothing for their bone structure to build off. So they have their skeleton on the outside, which results in an armor and just gives them that extra layer of protection. So when we talk about insects, a lot of people, you know, will say, what insect do you like the least? Oh, I hate spiders. Oh, that's not an insect, that's an arachnid. Okay, thanks, Johnny Pedantic. I think you knew what I was talking about. But it is, you know, it is a fact that, yeah, an arachnid isn't an insect. But we're going to lump them all into the category of garden bugs, friends and foe. So if you look at the slide, we have arthropods, which are your centipedes and millipedes. Very like an insect, except they have way more legs, way more body segments. But they have the exoskeleton, some of them have the antenna. We have the gastropod, which are slugs and snails. Snails have way better PR than slugs. That cute little shell makes all the difference, apparently. We have the arachnid, spiders. Thank goodness we don't have to deal with scorpions here. Scorpions are, I think I'm more scared of spiders than scorpions, simply because scorpions don't have to enter my realm of should I be scared of them. Spiders can live in my garden and my house. Scorpions cannot, not even as a pet, not even as a visitor. They're just not welcome. Then we have clitellata, which are the earthworms and leeches. 2 massively different ends of the same spectrum. Earthworms, we love them. Leeches, not so much. And then we have the always fun to pronounce, and I'm going to read it, otherwise I will make a mistake, the Lepidoptera, which are your butterflies and moths, and then caterpillars. And that's a really interesting one. And I didn't go into too much detail on it in here. There was so much subject matter to get into. I kind of picked some big ones because a lot of people know what a caterpillar is. They're easy to identify. They know what they do. That, you know, world famous kids book, The Hungry Caterpillar, kind of told everybody what they were and what they do. So they're very easy to recognize. The irony is, you ask most gardeners, what do you think of butterflies or moths? Love them. Okay, they pollinate, they're beautiful, they add to the garden. What do you think of caterpillars? I hate them. They eat my veggies, they eat my plants. But without caterpillars, sorry, you can't have a butterfly. So it's important to know when you're looking at these kind of bugs, and we're going to talk about this, is what exactly are you eradicating, and should you be eradicating it? So, all friends and foes. So we look, and you look at that picture, and they have caterpillars in the foe section, and they have earwigs in the friend section. Now, you ask a lot of people, and earwigs should be on the other side, but earwigs are incredible. They do an amazing job of breaking down organic material in the garden and helping compost it and helping amend the soil. And yeah, sure, they can give a pinch, and they're not really the most pleasant thing to look at. But it's very human-centric. When we look at a bug and go, what's its purpose? It doesn't have to have a purpose. It just is. It's just there. We may as well say, what is the purpose of a dog or a bear or a whale? You know, we look at things and we go, oh, that is bad because it eats my plant. But it's doing exactly what it was intended to do. So again, you look at that and you go, oh, a caterpillar is a bad bug. Yeah, sure it is. Absolutely. When they're chomping down your cabbages, they're not great. But when they turn to a butterfly and then they come back and they pollinate your tomatoes, you're like, oh, they're wonderful. So you've got to know what you're doing. And if something isn't trying to eat your garden probably isn't part of a healthy ecosystem. So when we look at our gardens, and I am so glad that this school of thought is changing. Years ago, maybe a decade, maybe a little longer, you used to be able to buy soil sterilants. And this essentially wiped out everything in the soil, killed everything, weed seeds, nematodes, bugs, everything. And then we found out just how bad it was. And the problem is, if you eradicate everything from a garden and sterilize it, it won't stay that way. It doesn't matter how clean you keep your garden. There's wild areas and there's other people who aren't gardeners and they don't care, and that's fine. Those bugs and those weeds are going to find a way onto your property. And if you don't have the right things in place to combat them from the beginning, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So you have to kind of encourage nature to do its thing. And that's what it's all about. And I'm going to digress slightly away from bugs. But hopefully you see the parallel. There was a famous story years ago, and I believe it was Yellowstone Park down in the States. And the park was dying, the entire park. This massive, massive park, think Banff National Park. The whole thing was dying from the plants to the amount of bugs they were seeing to the diversity in the animals. And they could not figure out why. And they brought in experts. And anyway, one expert, and this is the Coles notes, there's a National Geographic documentary on this and actually a story on it. And they brought in an expert, and the expert said, you need to bring wolves into the park. So they did. And they brought in this pack of predatory wolves. I think it was 10 or 12, not a huge pack, but a good sized pack. And what they found were the deer and the elk that were living in the park had zero predators. So they would move into an area. There was nothing to chase them out. And they would blanket that area. They would spend a month there. They would eat everything. They would poop everywhere. But it was massively concentrated. So it was choking up the ground. And the nitrates weren't feeding. They were causing burn. And they would decimate the plants before the plants had a chance to come up and go to seed properly. And then when there was nothing left for them, they would move on to the next area. So they introduced wolves. And these wolves said, hey, look, deer and elk. But these deer and elk weren't really used to wolves. I mean, obviously, that's an instinctual thing. And the wolves chased them. And the deer and elk would run. Now the deer and elk could not stay in one location. They had to move, which is what they're designed to do by nature. But if there's no predator, if we mess with the nature and we take that out, well, then they're going to adapt. They're going to become like any animal on the planet. If I don't have to move and leave and I have everything I need, if I've got shelter and food and water, I'm not going to leave, I'm going to stay. The wolves forced them to leave. Well, now the plants could come up. As they were moving and they were pooping in different places, it wasn't becoming concentrated, it was going back into a fertilizer. They would have to drink standing pools of water, which were keeping down mosquitoes and other pathogens. So they were drying areas out. Their hooves from running were aerating the ground. And this one introduction of a wolf pack within 3 years brought the entire park back to life. Now, simplify that down to bugs, okay? And you have a problem with a bug like a caterpillar, and you go and it's got everything it needs and it has no natural predators. It doesn't have any little birds because there's none introduced to your garden to get it. There's no praying mantis, there's no centipedes because you've killed them all because you don't like them. So these caterpillars are just running rampant. And then you're like, well, where are my butterflies? Why is nothing being pollinated? So it's all about being adaptive and understanding. And yeah, you know what? It sucks to see a caterpillar on your cabbages or on your kale or on your spinach. But there is a purpose for them and there are ways to deal with it. And if you have an infestation, absolutely use a chemical spray. And we're going to wrap up there at the end of this webinar. So that's kind of where I'm approaching this thing with bugs, is I'm going to give you some pointers on what you're looking for, how to identify them, what is going to help you control them. And in some cases, like oyster scale, the best thing you can do is a spray. And we're going to discuss all of that. So without further ado and moving along, we're going to talk about the common bad bugs. We're going to start there because that's what most people think of. Most people don't walk into Golden Acre and they go, oh, you got to help me. I got like 50 ladybirds and ladybugs. I'm trying, okay, little note to anybody listening. If I say ladybird, I mean ladybug. I'm from England. We call them ladybirds. It's the ladybird beetle. In North America, you call them ladybugs. It's the exact same thing. I try and catch myself. I'm about 50-50. But if I mess up, I do mean the ladybird.
I love it though.
Yeah, but you know me. The amount of people I talk to and they are so confused. They're like, I don't know what is he talking about a female bird? Or is this a weird name for the ladybug? Or is it a whole other thing? And so, yeah, nobody comes in and complains to us. They're like, oh my God, the dragonflies, they're just gorgeous, but they're everywhere. Nobody comes to us with that as a problem. However, they do come and say, I have a ton of spiders. We're going to get to that. But we're going to start with the bad bugs. And I think the number one, so I did a Google search and I did a Google Trends to kind of see if what my perception was on point, and it was. The number one bug in our gardens that is a pest is the aphid. And these guys, they can be vicious. They will never hurt you. They simply don't have the strength to pierce skin. They'll never hurt pets, kids, birds, anything like that. They simply can't do it. They are purely a herbivore. What makes them so brutal is how fast they multiply and the way they congregate. So if you have a plant, I'm going to use this one because it's got a nice big stem. Plus, who doesn't love dahlias? So if you get aphids on it, your plant will look fine. And then suddenly you'll see a stem. And I'm going to talk about the green aphids. There's black, there's yellow, there's pink. There's even a woolly aphid. Look it up if you don't believe me. I should have put up a picture of it, but I just put up the green one. And the woolly aphid is rad. It's an aphid. It almost looks like a dryer lint. And the first time I saw one, I'm like, what the heck is that? And I thought it was like lint or a fabric, and I rubbed it and I was like, nope, they're aphids. And what the aphids do is they'll congregate around a stem and they cluster, and it'll look like tons of bugs. They're tiny, 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 tiny. And they have a long proboscis, which is a nose, a piercing nose. And what they'll do is they'll drive it in to the stem, almost like drilling for oil, almost like, topping a maple tree for sugar. And they'll drive it in and they pull out the juices and the sugars of whatever plant they're on. And they'll attack anything. They'll attack annual flowers, they'll attack perennials, they'll attack tomatoes, roses. They're really not picky. And they pull out all the juices. Well, photosynthesis is the whole process of, essentially turning sunlight into sugar to feed the plant. That's literally plant food. Well, these guys will get in all around on your leaves. So your leaf is photosynthesizing, it's producing the sugar, it's pushing it down. Well, they're harvesting it out. Now, they are so small, individually, the damage is minimal. You wouldn't even notice. But because, like I said, they cluster, they pull out all the sugars, they can start causing damage. And you'll get misshaped leaf. If a leaf is opening up and they've already hit it, it won't develop properly. You'll get stunted growth, or it'll be misshaped. One side might be longer than the other because it didn't get the energy it needed as it was growing. And what the other problem with them is, a lot of times people will come to us July, August, and they'll be like, oh my God, I got wasps in my tree. Well, the wasps, they don't really care about the tree. There's nothing there for them. Aphids are in the tree. And what the aphids do, they eat nothing but sugar. So what they poop out is essentially a sugar byproduct. And that sticks to the leaf. And it's really, it's like a sticky, they call it a honeydew. And it attracts wasps and ants who are looking for that easy source of sugar. So you end up going, oh my God, there's ants all over my plant. And that's why ants get such a bad rep in the garden. Oh, the ants must be killing my plant. They're not. They're going for the sugar. They're going for the aphids. Ants will actually harvest aphids. But again, that's another subject. Got to try and keep this quick. We have a lot of ground to cover. And then the other problem is, as they weaken the leaf, so the leaf now, it's not getting what it needs. The whole plant is being reduced because the sugars are being pulled out, which now makes it, it's like if we're exhausted and we're not eating properly. Oh, I'm too busy to eat properly. How many of us have said that? And then a week, 2 weeks, a month later, we're like, oh my God, why am I so run down? Why do I feel sick? Because you're not eating properly. Same thing with the plant. It's not eating properly. It has a parasite pulling everything out. So that is the main problem with aphids. And always keep an eye out. When you go out to water your garden or enjoy your garden, visual inspections are by far the best. You see it, you're not sure, give it a flick, give it a little shake, see if anything comes off, identify it. If you can't, see if you can get your phone in. A lot of great quality cameras out there. Snap a picture, catch some in a Ziploc bag. All kinds of ways you can identify it will help you. But always start with a visual inspection. The amount of times I've caught aphids before they've become a huge problem, they have a real fast life cycle. So they're eating, mating, laying eggs, dying, hatching, and they're ripping through this cycle. And they're breeding faster than they're dying. So there's more and more. And if they get an uninterrupted food source, they're going to do what they do, and they're going to end up being a problem. Another one here is a spider mite. And this actually is in the arachnid family. It's not just called that because it looks like a spider. It is actually in the arachnid family. And these guys are tiny, way tinier than the aphid. They're like the head of a pin tiny. The one good thing about them is very, very often they're bright red. So you're looking at a plant and you see a red one on it. And again, if there's nothing to hunt them, there's nothing to keep them away. I think a bug just bugged Brandy. I just saw Brandy go. Hey, the bug wanted to come and attend the webinar.
I'm like hypersensitive right now.
They're talking about me. They're bright red, so they show up. And like anything, like I just said with aphids, a lot of these creatures, if they find a food source, they're going to do what they do. They're going to multiply and they're going to, devastate it. So if you see them, you want to smoosh it if you can. And a lot of times they live on the underside of the leaf and they'll live in the joints. So they're really hard to see. And way you'll notice is these guys are even more specialized than the aphid. So where the aphid just sticks its pointy nose in and goes slurp, 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 like it's having a milkshake and getting all the sugar out. These guys actually pierce the cells and pull out the chlorophyll. Well, that, as we know, is an essential part of photosynthesis. So they're limiting that happens. And what you'll notice first is tiny white dots, almost like blisters, appearing all over the leaves. And then this is often, if it goes unchecked, followed up with, essentially a stippled effect, which is where you see the cool patterns on the leaf. And it's because they're eating. They're not eating here and then walking over here. They'll literally drain this area, move to the next area. And there'll be little clusters of them going around. And again, it's the same thing. They're weakening the overall plant. So in and of itself, it would take quite a long time for a spider mite to kill a plant. But they'll weaken it to the point where it can't produce. It needs all these leaves. This plant needs all the leaves to produce these massive, beautiful flowers. You start cutting off the leaves, it's not getting the energy through photosynthesis to produce that. So now it's like, well, I can't produce flowers or fruits. So it starts dialing that back. Then it doesn't have the strength to fight off disease or other insects that are going to come. Again, an aphid sees this happening. Aphids and mites, they'll live on the same plant quite happily. They're not even competing for the same food source. So you want to really keep an eye out for that. You see some white spots on a leaf, flip it upside down, have a look into the crevices, see if you see them. If you see one, guaranteed there's more. And then next on our agenda, slugs and snails. And like I said, these are the exact same critter, essentially. Get into it, there are differences, but they prefer the same environments. They chomp on the same things. The snail just has better PR. And I have seen in my own garden and gardens that I've worked in, massive, massive devastation, literally overnight by these. They are phenomenal herbivores, and unlike the other ones I mentioned, they don't get in there with little proboscis, and they're not doing little damage. They come in and do massive physical damage to the plant. They normally prefer the soft and tender leaves, but I have also seen them chomp on stems. If they run out of leaf, they'll get to the stem. But quite often, you'll come out in the morning and you'll see a stem like this, and there's no leaves left on it. Because there are so many leaves on this plant, they're like, great, I'm gonna eat the part I love. It's like when you're a kid, okay? Do you sit down and eat your vegetables first, or do you eat the fun stuff on your plate first? Vegetables, and then you go, oh, I'm too full to eat the vegetables. That's what the slugs are doing, except they're eating the vegetables. But anyway, I digress. They're eating the vegetables they don't like. And what these guys will do is they prefer night, dusk. They prefer it when it's damp. They prefer the shade. And a lot of times when we wake up, it might be, 7, 8 o'clock, whatever. It might be 10 o'clock by the time we get out into the garden. The sun's out, it's warm, everything's drying out. Well, the slugs are gone. They've buried under the leaves, they've gone and hid under the garage or under the deck. They're out of there. And we see the damage. They've left open wounds. And that's where all kinds of fungicides can get in. Also, now your plant is leaking sap, which is going to attract the aphids and the mites and other problems. So this plant is physically damaged, and now it is susceptible to other problems. Then the other thing with slugs and snails is they are a major food source for skunks and raccoons. So a lot of times that goes hand in hand. And yeah, skunks and raccoons, you know what? They're adorable. They're fantastic. They are the cutest little critters. Not in my garden, please. Especially with a dog. He goes running outside and startles the skunk. No harm, foul, definitely foul. But no harm to the skunk, please. I have no quarrel with him. But I've had dogs skunked before, and it ain't pleasant. And they will be attracted if, again, these animals, it's an interchangeable food web. Everything is attracted to everything else, and there's so many moving parts. And if you have a ton of slugs, great. You might have a raccoon or a skunk that come in. The problem is if they take care of the slugs and now they're living there, they're like, oh, what else you got? And they'll dig up the lawn looking for other grubs or earthworms. They may destroy the garden digging stuff up. So they can take care of the problem and then become a problem. So again, it's all the things to look for all that. Now here's my funnest one, ants. Ants get such a bad rep. There are countless products out there to kill ants, to scare ants away. There's nematodes to kill ants. There's everything. Spoiler alert, they're not that bad. They really aren't. And ants aren't even responsible for your peonies opening. They're not that good. Ants just want to do their own thing. Yeah, you know what? It's unpleasant. You're watering your garden. You're not paying attention. You're like, what's tickling my feet? And you're standing on an ant's nest. Okay, well, next time you know it's there, move around it. And ants are actually pretty good. They'll harvest aphids. And if there's too many aphids producing more than they can eat, they'll kill them. They'll get rid of them. They're like, hey, you're out. We don't need this many. And they'll harvest aphids to get the sugars off them. They also help aerate the soil with their tunnels. They'll pull leaves and help, like they'll break them into smaller pieces and help break them down. If there's another bug and they're like, oh, this bug is causing us a problem, they'll gang up on it. They'll take it out. So ants aren't that bad for the garden. Ants, and I didn't include wasps in here either. Simply because ants can do one thing, wasps really don't. Wasps are a pest to us, not the garden. But ants really aren't that bad. But what I have seen ants do is kill a plant because you plant your plant. And then there's an ant's nest you didn't notice right here. It might be on the other side of the fence. And the ants are building their tunnels and these roots are in their way. Like, cut them off, boys. And they chomp through all the roots and then your plant dies. And I've literally seen that happen before where I've dug up a dead plant. I'm like, it's weird. I can't figure out why it's dead. And I dig it out and the root is swarming with ants. And I'm like, there it is. So ants will clear out roots to make their nest. And that is unfortunate. And that's why I included them here. But that happens rarely. The amount of dead plants I've dug out to the amount of dead plants I've dug out because they were killed by ants is probably 1,000 to 1. So I wanted to include ants on there. And now we have scale insects. And oh boy, these are the ones where I'm going to talk about using a spray and a treatment for. And scale insect, the most common one and the one we'll talk about is oyster scale. And that is riddling the Calgary cotoneastis. Now it is somewhat controlled right now. There was a massive push by the city and by residents because it was out of control. And these guys are by far the most tenacious. So they're only really active for a really short period of time in the spring. And the larvae hatch and the adults move and they're active 4, 6, maximum 8 weeks. And I'm being real generous there. And they go and they'll completely engulf a branch. And then they develop a ridiculously hard scale. They lock onto the branch, the scale covers them, they drive their head into the branch, and they start pulling out the sap. Birds can't get them. They're just too much of a problem. There's so many other things. The birds are like, not worth my effort. You know, birds are extremely clever and adaptive. If there was no other food source, I'm sure they'd figure out a way. That's not the case, so they just don't bother. They're not bothered by the elements. You can put a hose on jet, and I'm not saying this because I've heard it, I've done it, and blast them hard. I wanted to test, didn't even budge them. So a bit of rain, bit of frost, bit of anything, that's not going to bother them. Wind isn't going to blow them away. They are locked in there. And their scale, it's more than an exoskeleton. This thing is an armor because most, unless you're using the harshest ones, which we don't even carry, most garden centers don't. Most pesticides won't even get through to them. And they are brutal. And what they'll do is they're not going into leaves and they're not going into the herbaceous parts, like your slugs and your aphids. They are actively going onto, the wood. And they are actually sinking their, face in there, and they're just like, and they're pulling out all the sap, and they will fully engulf a branch this long, easily, all around it. Well, that branch is done. It's dead. They spread unbelievably because nothing can get to them. They're an introduced species too. They're not from Calgary, which is why they don't have the predators. they'll have in their places of origin, their population explodes, and they really, really, really make the shrubs susceptible. So a lot of people noticed the shrubs covered, Cotoneaster specifically, in these bumps. And then the leaves, before autumn, the leaves were turning red and yellow, curling up, and they were crispy. You squeeze them and they just poof, turn to dust. And that was fire blight. And the fire blight was like susceptible plant, and the fungus was getting straight into it. The Cotoneaster were ravaged by these guys. Best way to get rid of them, you see them, cut the branch off, get rid of it. Burn it if you have to. Get it in the compost. Do not leave it in your yard because they will spread. The other way is with a treatment early spring. Dormant spray kit. I should have grabbed one and I forgot. But it's a dormant spray kit and it's made up of horticultural oil and lime sulfur. You spray that on early spring before they're moving. The lime sulfur is a poison that coats them. The horticultural oil traps everything in. It's an oil, so it binds. And then when they start moving, oh, hey, there's a gap in the armor, the poison in the oil gets in and coats them, and you can knock them back. I have seen entire Cotoneaster hedges cut down to this high off the ground as the only way to eliminate the problem. And then people still treating with dormant spray kits. So scale isn't great. And then another one I have to talk about in Calgary is the lily beetle. Now, this is a very specific beetle. It literally devastates lilies. The clue is right there in the name. It's bright red and it's easy to spot. The reason it's on there is it has devastated the lilies in southern Alberta. Fortunately, much like the oyster scale, we are on top of it. A good spray with a insecticidal soap or a trounce will work. They're bright, bright, bright red. They're easy to pick off. Be careful not to mistake them for a ladybug. They do not have the black spots and they are longer with much longer segmented antennae. If you don't have lilies, these shouldn't be a problem. If you do have lilies, keep an eye out, have some insecticidal soap or some trounce handy, keep hitting them. You can win the fight, I absolutely promise. I've been dealing with these for decades. We had them in Montreal, still have them, and we managed to win. We had gardens with incredible lily beds, but it was always a fight. So I wanted to include those guys there. And now, onto the good bugs. And bam, how are we not starting with, and I even picked both names, I hope you guys saw that, ladybug, ladybird, beetle. And how are we not starting with that, right? The best PR of any bug, I don't know who's in charge of the ladybug PR, but 10 out of 10. I know people, my mom hates every bug on the planet. She hates it. She sees a ladybug, she actively tries to get it on her finger. You go, oh my God, look, a ladybug. Everybody's like, what? Instagram, 500 likes. Spider, 3 likes. So it has amazing PR, but it's good for a good reason. They are a gardener's friend. They're methodical, they're voracious, zero damage to plants. They will literally walk through the garden and just chomp everything. They're easy to see. They eat aphids, mites, mealybugs, so many things that we don't want to see in our garden. And then what they'll do, they'll clean out your garden and then they're like, on we go. They'll lay some eggs and then they'll fly to the next garden and take care of the problem over there to stop them from coming in. And the young are even more voracious. It's like me and my teenager, Harry. Okay, he out eats me and he's like chiseled. He's got a 6-pack. I hate him. I hate him so much. But that's my digression. But it's ridiculous how much they can eat. One ladybug by itself will eat 50 aphids in a day. The late stage larva, so the teenager, if you will, can eat 5 to 10 times that. It's ridiculous. So they are phenomenal. And a lot of these bugs that we're going to be talking about, the ladybird, the centipede, the spider, they overwinter. So when you're cleaning up in the fall, leave a pile of leaves, leave an area where they can nestle in. You don't want to wait for the spring to be like, oh, well, the ladybird's coming, the aphids are already here. Have them in your garden. And when they wake up, they are hungry. They are like ready to rock and roll. They'll go for eggs, they'll go for everything. And then here it is, the spider. Worst PR of anybody. People hate spiders. People come in and go, I have too many spiders. How do I kill them? You don't. You don't. Spiders are a predator. They're one of the truest predatory bugs out there. As in, if there is no food for them, you probably will not see them. You may see one or two, but you won't see many. If you go out and you've got 50 spider webs all over your rose bushes, the spider isn't your problem. The spider is not hurting your roses. It's trying to help you. And it will literally catch and eat bugs. The other thing is, with its web spread out, it catches bugs that it can't even eat, but it stops them getting to your plants. Yes, occasionally they catch bees and butterflies and dragonflies and whatnot, but dragonflies also occasionally eat spiders, so it all balances out. But they're magnificent. They really do scare me. I do have arachnophobia. I'm getting better. I'm forcing myself to get better. But what they do in the garden is incredible. And then what you can do, if you can stand to do this, if you go out and you're like, my God, look at all these spiders. Go up and look at the web. Like I said, they haven't eaten every bug. And you may see the bugs that they've attacked, and you'll be like, ha, spider mites, ha, aphids. And you're like, I'm on it. Now I know what my other problem is. You can start treating them, and the spider will give you that indication. You get rid of the food source, you'll get rid of the spiders, I promise. Killing the spiders, you're taking the one predator away that's trying to help you combat it. So just remember that, and believe me, I get it. And here's another one that has lousy PR, the centipede. The irony is, people go, oh my God, look at millipedes. They move and they're like, oh, it's got 1,000 legs. It's so great. It's eating my plants. The centipede, they move like greased lightning. They can climb walls. They'll deliver a nasty bite. Hey, fun fact, the spider and ladybird will also bite you. I have been bitten by ladybugs before, and it sucks.
Why would you say that?
Full disclosure. Do you think my little thing on it is going to affect its PR? I have told people that, and people don't believe me. They're like, no. And I'm like, no, they do. They bite. It hurts.
Maybe I don't want to believe you.
Exactly, right? Nobody wants. I don't know who. I want the PR agent of the ladybug. But the centipede is incredible. They actively run at bugs and hunt them down. That they're armored, they're fast. They don't like to come out. They like to come out at night. They'll eat the eggs of slugs and snails. They're fearless. They'll go up against any other bug in the garden. And fun fact, some of the tropical species, and I didn't put up a picture because I love you guys. Some of the tropical species are big enough to eat mice. Okay, they are a phenomenal predator. And they scare. The thing is, often you'll move a rock and you see a spider, and the spider's like 8 legs, moves pretty slow. You move a rock and see a centipede, and it's like bam, and that movement gets you. It gets me every time, and I'm a big fan of the centipede. But they are a fantastic creature in the garden. They won't hurt your plants, and they will go everywhere. They can climb walls, ceilings, they can climb up plants, they can get between thorns on a rose. They will go for the prey. They don't wait. They're not a spider like, hey, come to me. They're like, there's my snack bar. So, and then another one, and we brought this in this year, and I've always loved these guys. We used to see them in the gardens back east. And it's the praying mantis. bit more of a novelty, more like a spider than say a centipede. Very patient, they'll wait, but oh boy, they like to eat other bugs. Unfortunately though, you know what? If you've got a problem with spiders, get praying mantis. There you go, because praying mantis will eat spiders. Absolutely fearless, probably at the top of the food chain in predatory bugs. Nigh on untouchable by the other bugs. Centipedes don't want to mess with them. Heavily armored, patient, lethal fast when it comes to strike. But you know what? These are one of the predator bugs that I just said. They won't bite. I've had numerous ones on my hand. Kids love them. Kids absolutely love them. They're bright green. They hang out. Kids have a fascination with bugs that I think should be promoted so much. And the praying mantis is incredible. And then another one you gotta love is the dragonfly, and I touched on that. And I'm putting the dragonfly in there because dragonflies will hunt down anything airborne, including aphids. Now, aphids aren't airborne a lot, so they're not a primary food source of the dragonfly. But dragonflies love mosquitoes. They love black flies, midges, all of those things. They'll take down a wasp in flight. Fun fact, they're the only bug that can literally come to a dead stop, fly vertically up or down, and go backwards. Because of their 4 wings and the size of the wings, they can move every wing individually. That's my dragonfly impression. And they are phenomenal. I've seen some here down in Fish Creek Park. I had one land on me. Must have been that big. What an honor. I couldn't get my camera out in time, unfortunately. Me moving to get landed there, so I'm like trying to get my camera in. Anyway, it left. The dragonflies are amazing. And then one, you're never going to see it. Unless you're a scientist, you've got microscopes and everything else. You are never going to see nematodes, but I cannot say enough good things about nematodes. So nematodes, essentially that picture is magnified 1,000 times. And they're tiny, tiny little parasitic organisms that live in the soil. And they're highly, highly specialized. So we have one here for birch leaf miner. We have another one for ants. That's not going to eat anything else. Doesn't care what else is in there. Ants are its diet. And what they do, you attach it to your hose and you water it on the ant's nest. And that's how small they are. They come out of a hose end. Okay? That's how tiny they are. They hit the ground and they burrow through the soil. And what they end up doing is they literally find the larva of the ants or the eggs and they feed on them. They are so small, the ants can't even get them off. And they can eliminate all of these problems. We have one for indoors, and I should have grabbed them, but I wasn't thinking indoors. My brain was outside. Called pop poppers. And they are incredible for fungus gnats. A few years ago, I inherited a plant, and I brought fungus gnats into my house. Not great. There was Jenny's office, didn't get them. We closed the door when we realized we had a problem. Everywhere else, all the plants in all the other rooms ended up with these fungus gnats. Not a massive problem. You water, boom, big cloud of black flies, but they do start causing damage to the plant, and I don't want that many flies in my house. Just don't like it. I bought pop poppers and sticky sticks, cleaned the problem up, less than 2 weeks. Phenomenally efficient. These are coming out in a big way, and the great thing about them, when there's no food left for them to eat, they just die and they don't reproduce anymore. They are so small, there is 0 chance of them doing any harm to you, and they're specific. You put down the birch leaf miner, you put down the ant one. You put down the ant one on the birch leaf miner, you're gonna have birch leaf miner. You put down the birch leaf miner on the ant, you're gonna have ant. They are highly, highly specialized. So there is no chance, like some of those other bugs, they're gonna snag a friend bug. Like I said, I've seen a ladybug in a spider web before. What are you gonna do about it, right? That's how it works. Sad. Probably that's why the spider gets bad PR. Stop killing ladybird spider. But these nematodes, they're not going to do that. And then it would be very remiss of me during this seminar if I didn't talk about using actual chemicals. And these are relatively easy to use. Most gardeners have at some time used a pesticide for good reason. I've used them. So everything I've just said there about good bugs and a healthy balance and everything else, blah, blah, blah. I have used pesticides and I will again. I literally just said I've used pop poppers and sticky sticks. So I am in no way, shape or form trying to shame anybody into not using this stuff or saying it's bad. Absolutely not. We thrive to get a balance in our gardens, but we can't always do it. Like anything, if you have a plant that's riddled with aphids and you have one ladybird, I can only eat 50. There could be 1,000 on the plant. What's it going to do? It can't keep up. So you have to encourage that balance. And that's where these come in. So just be careful because these are not selective. So you've got aphids, and I've done it before. And I'll tell you a funny story. I took my trounce and I was like, and I hit a ladybird. Okay, yeah, nailed it. Now this isn't residual. How it kills, it's got pyrethrin daisy in it. It's got fatty acids in it, soaps. Basically, pyrethrin daisy is a poison. It comes from a daisy to bugs. And basically, the soaps help suffocate them, and pyrethrin's poison. And I saw it. I grabbed the ladybird, knocked it into my hand, ran over to the hose, and I was washing a ladybird off. Okay? Probably a little excessive. It lived, so it was worthwhile. But my point is, keep an eye out for your predator bugs. This stuff doesn't care. Kills aphids. You turn the leaf, you get right in there, it'll kill mites. Okay? You go spray a spider, end of the game for the spider. Okay? Hit a butterfly, butterfly is done. It doesn't care. So be careful and try and keep it off your flowers. Now it isn't residual. So I can spray this and a ladybird can come and land on it. It'll be fine because it didn't get covered in it. But if I spray it on the flower, what will happen is the pollinator will come and be like, oh, can't use that pollen, and leave. So when you're using it on, say, tomatoes, say you've got aphids on your tomatoes, just be careful around the flowering time to not hit the flowers. Just be aware of that. Make sure the plant spray is safe. Most of these are, but always read the instructions. I'm not going to go in and read the instructions to you right now, but just make sure that what you're doing, you're not going to have an adverse effect. Nobody wants to be consuming this stuff. It is a controlled product to control the bugs, which means it's hard. Wash your hands with this stuff. You're going to be fine, honestly, but you don't want to ingest it. It's not a great idea. Use PPE. And by that, I'm not saying you got to wear a hazmat suit. I just said that this has soap in it. I've been out in the garden before, got my plant, and I go like this, spray, the wind hits it, and now I've got soap and pyrethrin in my eye. Feels awesomely bad. And use it in a timely manner. It's not a residual. So if you look at your tomatoes and you're like, no aphids, you're wasting time, money, and effort. It's not going to do any damage, but there's no point to it. And if you're like, aphid damage, don't see any aphids, and you spray. Same thing. You buy a dormant spray kit because you've got oyster scale and you use it in August, you're going to do more damage because that oil is going to coat your leaf, magnify the sun's rays. Now you're causing sunburn to your plant too. So be aware of the time and how to use them and what the process is. And if you need information on that, hit us up. Come in and talk to us. Give us a call. DMs. The best way is always shoot us an email or come in person if you can. The phones can get pretty hectic around here, and we want to make sure we get to you guys. And then follow the directions. Again, like I always say with fertilizer, people read it and they go, oh, once every 10 days. Well, if I use it twice every 5 days, I must be doing way better. Not so. You can start causing damage. what it can do is it can start plugging the stomata in the plant. It can start having an adverse effect. Follow the directions. More isn't always more, right? More isn't always better. So you want to really be aware of what you're using. And like I said, no shame in the game using these whatsoever. I've moved into places, or I've gone to friends' houses, or indeed landscaping commercially, and gone and looked at a problem and being like, no, we need to spray, we need to do a treatment. Up to the point where we're like, no, we need to bring in an exterminator. Everything I just said about ants, I've seen ants nests. I keep using the ground here because it's where my foot is, but I've seen ants nests this big in people's gardens. Okay, great. That's not really going to cause a problem, except nobody wants to be out in the patio. I don't want to plant anything close to that because the ants will attack me. That has happened. So sometimes we do have to step in with our treatments, but hopefully after 3 or 4 years, everything used responsibly, you should be able to develop a balance in your garden. That's what we're striving for.